It's the Locked On Flyers podcast for Monday, May 13th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that is trying to distract myself from phantom sadness with salary cap math. Will it work?
I mean, I left 90-degree weather for this garbage.
All right.
You're Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, and thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I am here as always with Russ Cohen, who's on all your favorite social media apps at Sportsology. We are at Locked On Flyers on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, and Blue Sky as well. You can find us over on YouTube or on the SiriusXM app or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Subscribe to get our latest episode as soon as it's available here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ, you indeed just got back from a little vacation, so I apologize for making you do math this quickly afterwards,
right.
which we'll get into coming up a little later in the show. Just a quick men's worlds update with our pal Joel Farabee on Team USA. They lost to Sweden and in their first game, but then won over Germany. He was on two different lines so far with Will Smith and Trevor Zegras against Germany, with Shane Pinto and Ryan Leonard versus Sweden. Clearly, after that Sweden game, they decided to mix things up a little bit.
I get that.
Try something different. For Team Sweden, Philip Gustafsson is getting the starts in net so far, so no Sam Ersson, but we'll see if he gets a game as the tournament progresses. Today, USA is facing Slovakia and Sweden is facing Germany.
Yeah, I think the Urson will get a game. I would hope that, and you know John's not watching, but somebody would tell him that, hey, look at the guys he's playing with. They don't look at Joel Farabee as a future fourth liner. That's all I want to say on that. So that's nice for him that he's getting to play with guys that he should get to play with.
Yeah, he's getting like about 14 and a half minutes and with a pretty stacked Team USA, I would say. So that's pretty solid for him. Over in the OHL playoffs, London is destroying Oshawa so far. It is a no contest kind of fun. It's very weird because this is the final. But
but they're an all-star team. They really are. They're loaded. They're just loaded to the gills.
It's true, but the other rounds earlier in the tournament were a lot closer in some of the games. So the scores were 9-1 and 8-1 in the first two games. Bonk had 2 goals and 7 shots on goal in game 1, 3 assists in game 2. Denver Barkey with a goal and assist in game 1 and a goal and 3 assists in game 2. So the kids are doing all right over there.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't count it too heavily. I mean, you count it, you say it's a good season, see how far they can go, see if they can win a Mem Cup and all that. But yeah, some of these things, it's like they were having a good season anyhow. It doesn't make them look any better in my eyes. At least it doesn't make them look any worse, and that's good. So it's fun for them.
Yeah. I'd say at least they're, being significant contributors to these drubbings.
That's all you're looking
they
for.
They are part of game 3 is tonight, so we'll keep an eye on how they're doing. Our beloved Lehigh Valley Phantoms, however, did end up losing game 4 to the Hershey Bears and were thus eliminated from the Calder Cup playoffs. The score was 5-3, and they continued their 12-6 lineup, which was good, but it does mean that Massimo Rizzo did not play a game this season, which we have said we think is a mistake, and we'll figure out if there was a particular reason for it.
I guess I don't know how we're going to figure that out. Nobody's going to tell us.
Well, maybe they will. Maybe somebody will ask them. We'll figure it out. But in the meantime, I do think, we said prior to this series against Hershey, it was going to be an uphill battle for them. And I think when all is said and done, they played really well in 3 of the 4 games of the series. And up against a team like Hershey, I think that's a pretty solid result. I think, you could have said, well, they made some mistakes in this last game. It could have gone better. They did outshoot Hershey 32-27, but again, they made a few mistakes. They didn't capitalize on the power play but only two chances there. I think there's some real learnings here, along with the disappointment, and to go up against one of the top teams, which seems like the last several years in the AHL, and at least take them to 4 games was a pretty okay accomplishment.
It was mediocre, but at least they made the playoffs rather than not making it, so that part's good. But um, you could see that
And they
they're
won a round.
no, that's what I mean. Yeah, but you could see they're undermanned compared to the good teams, and that's
Right.
really that's the bigger picture, is to look at where you are and they're undermanned. So these guys did as much as they could. Like, that's it. They did as much as they could. It's up to Alan McCauley and Danny Briere to field a better team, just like at the NHL level. So that's where they're at. But like, I don't want to hear Flyers fans saying, "Oh, we're one of the top 10 organizations," because you're not. Because if you were, you'd still be in the playoffs. So, and that's and there's going to be some guys that are overseas like Michkov that aren't there. But the point is, and I rank organizations too, but a lot of times it's on paper. And so this is the only way you get to really test it out. So this is just as an example, the Capitals made the playoffs, you didn't, and now their team beat you. So now that you're behind the Capitals no matter what. And that's something that at least and so that's something to shoot for now.
Yeah, I think, one of the good parts of this series against Hershey is that you got to see some of the guys that we have been talking about all season
Yeah.
long step up a little bit. When Ali Lixel gets inserted back in the lineup, he had 6 shots on goal in this last game. So he's stepping up and he's taking shots, taking chances, and trying to put the team on his back to some degree. And I think that, even Garrett Wilson, who bothers me sometimes with his penalty shenanigans, I feel like he even like tightened things up in this last game because he knew it was do or die time here. And then of
Right.
course Tanner Lazinski scored for the team in this game, as did Wilson. Brett Gardner with the other goal, and he's become a solid AHL
Hmm.
center, I think, for them, and provided stability for maybe some prospect wingers to get some
Hmm.
opportunities there. So there is some good that has come of this. I think
Oh,
Hunter
sure.
McDonald really, got some quality experience in these two
Hmm.
playoff series. So I'm really, really glad for that. And I think that there was also some learning on the other side. I think we learned a lot in these playoffs about how far Emil Andre has to go, and I think
Right.
that we have to temper some expectations
Yeah.
there. Where he didn't contribute a ton to this game 4. He was in the box, and only got a couple of shots. And when you're expected to be like a power play kind of guy on the blue line, you have to really step up a little bit more on that front.
Yeah, no question. And that's something that, hey, he needs another season in the AHL. There's no shame in that. That's
No.
a lot of times that is the path. I know everybody always wants to believe your prospects are better and they're going to do it quicker, but most of the time that's just not going to be the case. Uh, yeah, there's guys to worry about too. Denoye, plays on the fourth line now. Like, that's one step out the door. So that's 1 foot out the door already. So that's, you have to worry about that. So what I'm looking at them and I'm like, okay, um, you need to, probably get rid of 1 or 2 of the older guys. So there's room for some of your other guys to make this team next year, plus whoever you might pick up along the way. You might pick up some younger prospects that you think have a chance to play a couple years in the NHL, but you have to start looking at it that way. And so I think they need to retool this team a bit. I mean, Peterson's going to be stuck being the goalie. There's just no way around that.
Well, that is an interesting statement because it's directly related to our next conversation about the salary cap for the Flyers and kind of just doing an overview of the lay of the land there. And all of what you just said relates to it. We're going to talk about it coming up next.
We all know how important life insurance is, but it can be overwhelming to find the right policy on your own. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with a safety net, financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 a year per million year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. I know it feels so much better to have insurance and not have to worry about my family being covered. Your work insurance policy may not cover enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you leave your job. And Policygenius gives you an unbiased advice from a licensed expert support team. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click on the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl.
Later in the week, we will be answering your mailbag questions. So you can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com, send us a message on Twitter, or comment over on YouTube with any of those questions. You may have some about the Flyers salary cap situation. And I think, a lot of people talk about how the cap is going up this year. And, it is. However, it may not be going up enough to help the Flyers. So
Right.
we know the cap is 87.7 for this upcoming year. And I think for the Flyers, we have to make a few assumptions, right? Just to get everything straight. So Ryan Ellis and Ryan Johansson, I am going to assume are an LTIR for the purposes of this conversation. They may be able to, Johansson may retire, or Ellis. There could be other things, but let's just say for the sake of argument, those guys are on LTIR, right? We're going to assume that Bobby Brink is a full-time Flyers player in this conversation, and he makes the team. Which I think, is a likelihood. It's not a guarantee, but it's a likelihood. No. So that gives us 21 spots on the roster taken. If they go 13-8-2, like they did this year, that's 2 open D spots. If they go 13-7-2, then it's a forward and a D spot that are open this year. We've got 20 guys signed to ELCs or have two-way deals whose contracts are continuing into next season. That's 43 contracts total, including Ellis and Johansson. So that all makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense. I think they need to do the 13-7-2. I think based on where their guys are and what's happening with the team, I think that's the best course of action.
Yeah, I think so too, but you never know with what's going on here.
No question about that.
So then you immediately have to say, well, how much dead cap is there for the Flyers this year? It's a lot. It is quite a bit. So we still have the Kevin Hayes salary, retained salary. We have the Tony DeAngelo buyout, goes one more year. And then we're going to then assume that Cal Peterson is going to play in the AHL, right?
Right.
So we still have that AHL penalty, which is $3.85 million here. And then there is a cap penalty from last season that's carrying over. That's $245,000. So our dead cap is $9.3 million.
It's a lot. Like people used to talk about Minnesota's dead cap. Well, you're right up there with Minnesota now. So
yeah. It's 10% of the cap.
It's a lot.
So it is a lot. And so if you add up all of the current Flyers salaries, and you don't have either that 2 extra defensemen or a forward and defenseman because we don't know who those 2 players are gonna be yet, we only have $728,000 left for those 2 players.
Right. But here are my recommendations. Um, First one
Well,
is go ahead.
yeah, I mean, so the question is we do have to do something here, right?
Right.
So in order to make it work, and it's right now not so much about what the solution is, but what are the questions here? Like, what are the questions the Flyers should ask themselves in order to solve this problem?
Well, they have to buy out a player. It's obvious. There's an underperforming forward that you need to buy out. Once you buy out that forward, then you're now creating another spot, which is good, and you're creating cap space, which is good. And that's Cam Atkinson. You have to buy him out.
Well, but there's also then creating more dead cap space for the future.
It's okay. I mean, that's going to carry forward. You could have more dead cap space going into next year too. Some of it falls off, but yeah, that's you have to do it because the diminished return that you get from the player is not worth the failed development time that you would get for some other player.
Yeah, I think the way you can justify it, I think to some degree is, well, the Kevin Hayes and Tony DeAngelo dead cap will fall off.
Right.
Um, oh, by the way, this upcoming season, not that it affects the cap, but it's the last year the Flyers have to pay Ilya Bryzgalov.
I'm sure he's sad about that, and I'm sure the minute they stop paying him, he'll leave New Jersey.
Yeah, I think so. Um, I just thought that was an interesting
That
thing
is
to note.
interesting.
But yeah, so I think that's where the crux of the issue is, because right now, math wise, we have about 46 million in forwards and 17 million in defensemen and 5 million in goaltending. Those are like rounded numbers,
Yeah, it's got to be top
right?
heavy in defense because
Yeah.
you have to let Risto play. If you can't play him, you can't trade him. No one's taken him in a trade without him playing all this time this last season. So if he shows he's healthy, then teams will be interested, and there's a possibility down the road that you can move him. But right now, he's part of the team, and you have to just treat it that way. And then, at some point, you could talk about who you might be able to trade off the roster to save more cap space.
Yeah, I mean, you see like that vast difference we have between forwards and defensemen,
Yeah,
where, our top paid defenseman is Travis Sanheim and he's making 6.25, which we
right.
talked about Travis Sanheim and his season and he's acting as a number one defenseman when he really isn't. And that is the salary of a number one defenseman who really isn't, right?
Right.
He's
Yeah, it
that.
is. Yeah, exactly. That's
So
all
I'm not,
commiserate.
yeah. So I just don't think he's being overpaid at all.
No. No,
In
I don't
terms of
either.
his role on the team. So I think, Ristolainen is the guy that's standing out there on the defensive side of things. And to your point, yeah, there's just no way around it. We got to watch him play next season. So there really
Right.
isn't wiggle room on the defensive side of things
No, and they
right
shouldn't
now.
and honestly, they should not sign a defenseman in the offseason because you have Ronnie Attard, who's more than capable of filling in. I'm assuming they're going to sign Zamula, who should be a starter next year, and at some point Andre coming up. You should not sign any other defenseman. There shouldn't be a
Well,
Mark
unless it's
Stahl
Adam
signing.
Jennings,
Right. But there shouldn't be any Mark Stahl or Eric Johnson type signings. No.
there should not. Absolutely. On the forward side of things, to your point, this is where things start to get a little dense because you have Sean Couturier's salary sitting there at 7.75, which was a good deal when it was signed.
Sure.
I
I
will
mean,
maintain.
again, you can't predict future injury and what's going to happen to a player. That's, unless that player has a career, has injury after injury after injury, which he didn't, there was no way to predict this.
Yeah. So the next highest paid forward on the team is Owen Tippett. at 6.2. We are going to talk about Owen Tippett on tomorrow's show, and break down his season that was, and we'll talk about, whether that salary was earned. I thought it was a good deal, and I still think it's a good deal in
It's a good
terms of,
potential deal. He hasn't reached the
yeah,
potential yet.
yeah, but that's what you do sometimes.
Sometimes,
So,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
I think, the big then next two salaries on the team are Travis Konechny, who this is the last year of his deal at 5.5. And we've talked about Cam Atkinson, and then Joel Farabee is making 5. And so I think that it's very clear that Atkinson is the odd man out here, right? In terms
Right.
of that tier of salary on the
Oh,
team.
yeah. Yeah, and that's what I think you have to do something about, and then, you have a couple of veterans that you should put on the trade market to see what you could get. And that's what this offseason should look like.
Yeah, and that's where the Travis Konechny questions are going to come into play here, right?
And
It's,
Scott Lawton.
yeah, Scott Lutton, I would say, is like the next band down in terms of salary
Oh,
and what
yeah.
you would get in
Yes.
return.
Yes.
So you have Noah Cates, Scott Lawton, Garnet Hathaway, I guess Ryan Paling to some extent. His
Yeah, because
salary is
you
a
you
little
gave
bit
him
lower, but
you gave him money now, so he's a little higher.
yeah. Yeah. So, he's at 1.9. So that's kind of your next tier. And I don't think, I mean, Noah Cates has a lot to prove this
He does.
upcoming season, but, his cap hit isn't a huge problem for the Flyers at
No,
the
but
moment.
he's a problem if he can't seem to get back what he was able to do 2 years
Sure.
ago. Then that becomes a problem.
Yeah, and then you look at goaltending and if you look at, two goaltenders, 4.725, that seems pretty solid for an NHL team. It's going to be whether Fedotov's salary is going to make it worth it in the end, and that's the question there.
Yeah,
But
so
as far as
something I wanna say about that. So, we hear all these rumors. Well, they paid for Dodov because he has the same agent as Mitchkov, and that's why they gave him the extra money to get Mitchkov. You know what? They didn't have to do that. So I am a believer that there are other channels that you could do, and to put somebody else on the roster that may not be roster ready, I don't think was a great move. But we'll see. We'll see how he does. Uh, on money, on paper, like you said, this isn't bad, but they don't have a proven backup. That's the
right,
reality. And if they
that's
don't
the
have a
thing.
proven backup and the year starts, and let's say 10 starts in, they're going to start to overplay Urson again, then you're going to have a big problem because you can't call up Peterson. You're not going to, unless you have all that cap space, you're not going to do that. And Kolosov's not going to be ready. You can't count on Kolosov to be ready. I'm telling you, people, he needs time in the AHL. He's like any other goalie prospect. So that's, we'll see where that sort of lays out.
Yeah. So, as far as the percentage of the salary cap that's going to goaltending for the Flyers, it's gold. But the actuality of it, there are still some
Right.
questions there. So that's kind of like our lay of the land. We've got a bunch of guys on expiring contracts. We've got those two-way deals I mentioned. We'll dig more into who those potential roster spots could go to, whether it's coming from the outside or prospects. We'll get into that as the offseason progresses, but that's a good overview of where the Flyers are from a salary cap perspective. It is Monday, so we will have our new weekly off-season listener poll we'll get to, plus our Nemesis of the week coming up next. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. All right, so we have our new weekly poll for y'all out there, and we just did a overview of the salary cap situation. So we're going to ask you, which Flyers cap hit has you the most concerned for this offseason heading into next year? And your choices are Sean Couturier, Ivan Fedotov, Cam Atkinson, Rasmus Ristolainen, or Cal Peterson. So get us your answers. You can select your option on our poll post over on YouTube. We'll put a link to it in the show notes as well. And we look forward to hearing your responses. We'll get into the results at the end of the week. For our nemesis of the week, last week I talked a lot about New York sports teams in the playoffs and it causing drama for my friends who have tickets to a concert at MSG that may have to get rescheduled. And the drama still continues. The Knicks are tied in their series, and we've seen how the Rangers are doing in their series. So I have one particular friend who has literally started like watching the tail end of the Knicks games just to keep track. It is absolute madness. But good luck to my friends in getting to go to see Niall Horan. Anyway, this week, for me, I think after the dust settled from the NHL draft lottery last week, all the prognosticators are trying to come out with their mock draft lists. And with the Flyers picking at 12, there's so many different permutations there in terms of who could potentially fall to the Flyers, what their strategy is going to be. And this is where I have to look at 87 million different mock draft lists and figure out which seems the most likely, what is my opinion, and all this. So it's like I feel like the It's Always Sunny board with the string and the post-its behind me, looking at, what are all these permutations? There's so many of them that come up, but I guess that is also part of the fun of the off season. So it is fun, but it is also my nemesis.
Sure. I mean, spoiler alert, I'm not going to be looking at those mock drafts. I'll leave that up to you. I have my own ideas from what I've seen and what I will continue to see. Here's my nemesis. It's again with transparency, and now it'll be with Lehigh. If Massimo Rizzo is injured, then we should have known at the get-go, like he's injured. Like he was injured. He came back in, he played, won a championship, but he might still be too banged up to play. We shouldn't be having to question whether he is or not. Like we should have gotten an answer. The season's over. There should have been some sort of resolution for the fans. Like, hey, we wanted to get Massimo in there, but we decided to rest him because, with the injury he had, it's in the best interest of the organization. Fine. Then we all leave it alone. Nobody would touch it. For as long as there's no transparency, we're going to keep wondering, why didn't he play? And that's where transparency comes in. And that's where a nice, report from the GM on how the prospects are doing, or Alan McCauley speaks about how his team is doing, or something. Give us something, give the fans something, because I think they need that. If they're going to wait until that 3-4 weeks from now, after the combine, or maybe even a month from now, after the combine, to kind of just field draft questions, I think you're doing it wrong. That's just my opinion.
Listen, I think that's totally fair. And like I said, maybe we'll get some information. Maybe we won't, as sort of the dust settles from the Phantom season as well. And we will be talking more about it, do a more in-depth breakdown of their season in review and things we'd like to see from that team going into next season to be maybe even better of a development path for the Flyers prospects, because I think that is extremely important as well to the health of the organization, to your point earlier in the show, Russ. That will do it for today's show. We will be back tomorrow with a breakdown of Owen Tippett's season, as I mentioned. So looking forward to that. As a reminder, we always want to hear from you. So if you've got a prospect you want us to talk about, a Flyers player that you particularly want us to do our season in review of sooner rather than later, let us know. You can send our questions in via Twitter at Locked On Flyers. You can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com or comment over on YouTube. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube that's now available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Have a great day, everyone.